Good evening, everybody. I'm Edie Broida, and I am here to welcome everyone, longtime supporters of Insight and new friends of Insight, and most especially the students of Palm Beach State College and their professors and Dean Ginglas. We are so happy to have you here this evening. This evening begins I-Series 2. This series theme is Acts of Courage, and each of the 3 programs in this series will reveal how brave men and women survived and risked their lives to save others during World War II. Our Insight mission, as you know from your program, is to inspire and educate using lessons from the Holocaust and genocides to eliminate prejudice while encouraging respect and acceptance in our schools. If you look at the back of your program, you will see a list of grants that we have recently awarded to educators and students that reflect this mission, and we are honored to have several teachers from the Palm Beach School District in the audience, along with Maureen Carter, Holocaust Program Planner for Palm Beach Schools. Programs like tonight's require many hours of planning. Anita Naftali and I, co-chairs, wish to thank our fellow Insight Board members and especially our president, Roz Louie. Roz, where are you? I think you deserve a hand. Where is she? Also, the hardworking members of the Education Committee, the outstanding staff at Eissey Theater, our underwriters, and yes, our husbands. I think Anita and I have spent more time with each other in the past 2 weeks than with them. Insight is actually an acronym. S for supporting, I for instruction, G for genocide, H for Holocaust, and T for teaching. But there are still many who are not certain what we are about. To illustrate this further, Roz Louie generously funded this very brief film, which will now show you Insight in action. Thank you.
An extremely important job, and this job consists of spreading the word of the Holocaust so this catastrophe does not repeat itself.
Insight Through Education promotes educational awareness by encouraging the applications of the lessons learned from inhumane events in a setting that makes a positive difference for students and empowers them to be upstanders.
I think Insight is aptly named because it has given us as teachers the tools to help our students, but for our students it has opened tremendous new insight within them.
The history of the Holocaust, 1933 to 1945. The systematic planned annihilation of European Jews and other groups by Nazi Germany, a watershed event in the history of humanity, to be taught in a manner that leads to an investigation of human behavior, an understanding of the ramifications of prejudice, racism, and stereotype, and an examination of what it means to be a responsible and respectful person for the purposes of encouraging tolerance and diversity in a pluralistic society and for nurturing and protecting democratic values and institutions.
The support that Insight has provided is immeasurable.
It's a privilege to teach about the Holocaust and genocide studies, and it's also a privilege that Insight cares so much about the education.
Fundraising activities sponsored by Insight Through Education provide schools with funding for educational grants, teaching tools in the classrooms, and trips to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C.
So this trip provided by Insight had a remarkable experience on the kids in very different ways, and that was probably, for me, the most powerful moment of the whole trip.
Insight, as I said, has made this possible for the past 10 years, and every year my students come away saying how valuable this was, how awesome it was and how much that they learned from this personal experience.
Experience of a survivor brings history to life and conveys the reality of what the ugliness of hate, prejudice, and bullying can have on innocent people.
To bring this message of accepting all people, to be good people now, and build generations for a safer world for all people. That's what Insight is helping us do.
And with that, we are very, very fortunate that there are some helping hands. And in our case, the helping hand is the Insight organization.
Insight Through Education is a nonprofit, non-sectarian 501(c), whose purpose is to use the experiences of the Holocaust and genocides to recognize and oppose hatred and bigotry, and to encourage tolerance, acceptance, and respect.
Tonight we will feature a different aspect of the Holocaust, the partisans. Hollywood portrayed them in the movie Defiance, which many of you have seen. Who were they? They were 20,000 to 30,000 Jewish men and women, many of them teenagers, who hid and survived in the forests of Europe. They joined organized resistance groups and fought the Nazis by sabotaging German trains, convoys, and bridges. They were not fighting for an ideal, such as nationalism or anti-fascism. They were fighting for their lives, true Holocaust heroes. The documentary you are about to see focuses on one partisan, Avraham Meir Shmulevitz, Alan Small, who is our guest speaker this evening. With him is fellow partisan Label or Leon Bask. We are pleased to have Leon here in the audience tonight. Leon, will you please stand to be recognized? Another man of courage. Alan and Leon were friends and schoolmates in Ivy, Poland, and both served in separate brigades in the forest. These two men parted at the end of World War II and never thought they would see each other again. Tonight you will see what happened when they found each other and 55 other partners in resistance at the reunion.
My parents had realized that they were leading people out of their ghetto. And one of the stories my dad told me is that they heard that they'd taken 5,000 of the Jewish people in the town.
They had all the Jewish men from 16 to 60 report in the marketplace, and they picked out 220 men, all the teachers and clinical staff, the business people, and my father was one of them. And they took him out about a mile and a half from our house, and they shot every one of them.
The shots, we could hear it from a distance, you know. And we figured it out. We were talking to each other. This is where the massacre going on. And they told us to go back to the ghetto. I found my grandmother. When we came home, we find her in a pool of blood, lying in bed, shot. And then they said we will not go where the Germans want to send us, but we're going to flee into the woods.
So we decided that we are going to organize ourselves and leave for the forest. and fight against the Nazis and take revenge for our loved ones.
Approximately 30,000 Jews escaped the German ghettos and camps during World War II, forming or joining organized armed resistance groups. They were known as Jewish partisans. Jewish partisans saved thousands of lives while sabotaging German trains and convoys. Partisans were active in 10 countries throughout Europe, helping contribute to the end of World War II. Though most of them served in non-Jewish units, thousands served in all Jewish partisan groups, including the Bielski Brigade, the Avengers, and the Greenspan Unit.
I was 14 when I joined the Partisans. And I would say the brigade must have at least around 1,000 members.
They're not soldiers, they weren't soldiers. My wife wasn't a soldier, she was 14 years old. I was 70 years old.
We came to the woods. We heard about the German army. They came and the bullets, I could hear it right beside me. And I wasn't afraid at all.
They had decided that rather than be led to slaughter, that they were going to go out fighting. And if they got killed, they got killed. I mean, they made a point of trying to save as many people as possible. They weren't only looking after their own lives.
After the war, Jewish partisans immigrated to countries all over the world, starting families and businesses and becoming involved in their communities. In 2011, over 55 former Jewish partisans came together in New York City for a special dinner in their honor. Some of them have not seen or spoken to each other in over 65 years.
I'm very excited to see my people getting together and just refresh my memories from that time.
I haven't seen Leon in 65 years. We went to the same school, and I remember his family. I knew his brother. He has no idea whatsoever that I'm coming to this dinner, and I don't even know if he's going to recognize me.
Check Zelwyn.
Check Zel?
Zelwyn, Z-E-L-W-I-N. All right.
I'm hoping that I can find somebody that will know my parents, somebody that's close to 90 or thereabouts, or that was around the same age as my parents would be if they were alive today, that would remember them. So that's what I'm hoping to find this weekend.
My
name is Rami Cole. Why don't you take this one here?
There you go.
Okay.
Are you coming to the event tomorrow?
Yeah. During the war, I think I just said it's not right, and I'm going to fight it as much as I could. But to run and be scared and run, that's not the way of life.
This is my mom. Yeah. And me? Do you have one for me too? No, just the partisans. Just the partisans? Yeah, just the
In the forest, we not only fought a physical battle, but we also fought a spiritual battle. As we were sitting around the fire, singing songs together, supporting each other, and dreaming about a better future and a better tomorrow.
Frank Blachman sounds very familiar.
Yeah, no.
Poland.
Yeah.
Do you know me?
No. Now I know you.
Blachman, I know Blachman.
When we acquired firearms, we acquired also power. You don't have to know how to speak nice or so on. When you armed, you got everything. But we did not abuse our power. This was the greatest thing what we did, and I'm happy about it.
Where do you live now?
Fifth Avenue.
Oh, in New York.
Mira, I saw Mira the last time when we went out from the woods.
this was the last time. And she says, yes. So Mirele, look how wonderful to see you again after 50, 60 years.
I'm here for a reason, to find people I can connect with, and I've been very fortunate in the fact that I've been able to connect with. I met a couple people that knew my parents, so right now everything's been great. I think my mother would be very emotional. I think my dad would be real happy to know that his whole family's basically taking the interest that we have and coming here and carrying on his legacy.
Hi, how are you? Fine. So we're going to stand like this. No, this way. We're going to have you turn around.
And we were in Partisan to get 120 miles. It took us 2 days and we walked. We never complained. Now, if I walk 10 miles, I'm complaining.
We have to wait just a moment.
I'm in the right way.
You're in the perfect place. Just relax a little bit. Yeah, there you go.
And I was a radio operator. And I
Behind enemy lines.
transmitted news from the partisans to Moscow and gave news from Moscow to partisans.
We tried to avoid the fight because we didn't look for fight. Our task was to blow up the railroads, the highways, to cut down the supplies to the German army.
You are from where?
Nevada.
Nevada. I used to come in Nevada when I was about that size. I came to see I met people here that I don't even remember. It was one lady here, and she tried to refresh my memory. It took a while before I caught on to it. No, I came to see my Bob, and when school was over, you know, she has a meal.
When I walked over and I saw Leon, my heart started beating like, you know. You have to realize that 65 years is not 65 days. It's something that I never thought that in my lifetime I will see Leon again.
Label.
How
Thanks, you recognize me? Don't look at the name. Label it.
Yeah. Oh.
Avomeya.
Avomeya, sure.
Oh my God.
Well, we hugged each other and like two brothers, you know, because we went to the same Hebrew school. We played soccer. Then we had a ball, you know.
Leon Basked served in the Bielski Brigade, bringing Jews to safety and acting as a sentry to protect them in their forest encampment. Alan Small was in the Kirov Otriad in Belarus. He served as a scout and participated in the destruction of German trains while fighting with his group.
I didn't know anything about you after 65 years. You didn't know anything about me, you know. And this is the first time I see you.
He's from Slovakia, and the only other person from Slovakia. This is not Frank Weichman, Romy Cohn. Frank was in Poland. Romy Cohn was in Czechoslovakia.
My book is going to be published in Slovakia.
In Slovakia?
Yeah, it must be this fall.
Is that so?
Yeah.
And Romy has...
The name is Rather Die Fighting. In English.
Very good, excellent title. I like it.
That's
my book.
Huh? That's your book. Oh, that's nice. I didn't bring my book.
I was with your father. First train would be derailed. We never knew how many Germans was killed.
Nice to meet you. I was reading your book.
Oh.
And you were a partisan in the same place that I was.
Is that so long by
in Slovakia?
Yeah.
You had a company, but I recognized you when I came here. Mijn Schicki, dein Bruder.
My brother, yeah. Rest in peace.
This is a sign.
A picture?
Where are those?
That's my brother.
That's your brother, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I remember when he got married, and he was one of the youngest guys after the war that he married his wife Libby. And then after that we parted in 1947 and said goodbye. I came to America and we were never in contact with each other after we said goodbye.
This is my Tochter.
I'm the oldest daughter.
You're the oldest
I'm Marcia
daughter?
Gassig.
And we went to the same school together. He was one class above me.
Oh my goodness.
You know what I
Oh,
mean?
my God.
And I haven't seen him in 65 years. And his brother, Yushike.
Yes.
Jason. And,
But they call them Yushike.
yeah, Yushike.
Yeah,
Yushike.
There is not too many left of us already. We have got older, and thank God we still remember what we went through.
And you were in my father's partisan group? Were you in the same partisan group?
For a short time.
And was that the Stalinskaya group?
It was the Stalinskaya group, but the father was with me that time in the Chapayevskaya group they were.
The year after our wedding, she was born.
Oh my God.
We were there 2 years in Munich while she was born.
Unbelievable, unbelievable, unbelievable. I mean, it's like everything is like yesterday, right?
My emotions are almost impossible to describe to you because whoever dreamed that I'll see Leon again? Every time he said something, I started remembering something else, and it just caught up. How can you catch up in 1 hour or 2 hours? Somebody that you didn't see 65 years. You can describe something like this. It's impossible to describe. It's just that it's the happiest moment in my life.
Good evening, everyone. What a wonderful night. So glad to see you here. To think there are over 55 Jewish partisans in the audience with us tonight. 55. So many stories this evening. Partisans who, as young men and women, seemingly ordinary people who had taken extraordinary measures, risking their lives and arming themselves and protecting their own and their Jewish heritage. Physical resistance, spiritual resistance, they are heroes among us, and their vital histories need to be shared and saved now more than ever.
Tonight, we honor you. We honor your bravery and your courage. Thank you for putting the lie back into the teeth of those who said Jews did not fight back. And for inspiring all of us to standing up against tyranny, oppression, and discrimination. I salute, I applaud you, we all applaud you.
Sag nicht kein Mal, als du gehst den letzten Weg.
This is the hymn that we sang in the forests. And all the partisans, they sang it.
Wenn noch unser Ausgebet ist schon.
Die inneren finstere Nacht. The days are very sad, but it will come. The ungewillte Show. It will come the right day that we will say with our foot, wir seien da, we are here. We are proud that we are here.
Weißen Palmenland bis weißen Land von Schnee. Wir kommen an mit unser Pein, mit unserer Weh.
Und wo gefallen sie, so spritzt von unser Blut. Sprotzen wird dort unser Gewurre, unser Mut.
It is like a national anthem. It gives you a good feeling, you know, that you have a future and things like that, you know. It came shivers in my body, you know, when we were singing that song.
Wie a Parole
and we were singing this in the Partisans. And after the war, I met my beautiful wife in Poland. We are married over 65 years. And every morning when we go to our exercise, I see my beautiful wife and I sing the song to her. So by singing the song every morning to my wife, it makes my day. Because we are both partisans and coming with happiness that we are alive.
We are here. This is a song in English.
This shouldn't be the last road. You should always go ahead. You should fight for your rights, for your tomorrow, and for your life. All enjoyed it. The food was excellent. The drinks was fantastic. And we all had a good time. We loved each other. We understood each other. And it was really a pleasure being and to seeing them all.
Yeah, this is something going to be now. Now look at this here. That's my son. That's my daughter-in-law, Abby.
And they live near you.
What?
You live near us? Yeah, the Florida crowd. I'm sharing.
The Youngest Partisan, I don't have that yet. I have to get it. I try to read everybody's book. I will find it. I will find it.
And my husband wrote a book. It is history, 5 years of the war.
Do you remember my dad?
Sure.
What did he do during the war?
What I was doing?
Going after the Nazis and helping people, right?
Nazis and helping people. The biggest thing is to help and to save Jewish lives.
I'm Sonia and Zeus Belsky's granddaughter. So my grandfather Zeus led the resistance against the Nazis, where the movie Defiance is about them. So I'm the granddaughter, and that's the grandson, Matthew.
Do you know this one?
I know them because my grandfather saved her life. She was a fighter. We've celebrated every year since. She was at our bar mitzvahs, the weddings, everything, and it's a lifelong bond.
We met so many relatives today that we never knew we had. It was tremendous. They're not blood relatives, but we're all related. Our parents went through the same thing and had the same mission. Hopefully my kids will learn from this, and that's why it's such a great thing that they know what it's all about.
Judith I saw about 55 years ago.
She hasn't changed?
No. I'm already planning that when we get back to Florida, forget it. I'm not going to let you go now.
Are we having a party?
Yes.
My house,
When I was in the underground, it was a happy time of my life. I felt I'm fighting not only for myself, I was fighting for the Jewish people. That's what I'm proud of it. And that's why I keep on living for it, and I tell as many people I can the message, what happened in World War II to the Jewish people.
I'll gather my courage. I'll gather my laughter. I'll gather these stories.
We had so much in common and so much to talk about. I mean, we wasn't got enough time to catch up about everything. I was very emotional, it was very hard for me, but I loved every second of it.
We all talked to each other, and we got the second generation, and we got all so close together like it's one family.
The future generation should know one thing. Remember your history. stand up for what is right, and never give up.
Thank you to the young singers of the Palm Beaches with artistic director Sean Berry and piano accompanist Betsy McHugh for singing that Partisan song. And now we are honored to welcome Alan Small, our guest speaker this evening. He is an incredible man of great strength, courage, and perseverance. He was only 14 years of age when he became a partisan. How did it happen? How did he survive? What challenges did he face? We will learn that now as he shares his extraordinary life story with us. Imagine his journey from fighting as a youngster in the forest to becoming a successful businessman. He is truly an inspiration. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce Alan Small.
Thank you. Weren't they wonderful, the girls? Unbelievable. I couldn't sing it in Yiddish better than them. So many stories have been written about the Holocaust, so many books, movies made. But I would like to tell you a story about an 11-year-old boy that was born in Eastern Poland, the youngest of 4 children. And that's when the war started in September of 1939, and everything almost came to an end. Germany attacked Poland, and after 2 weeks the war was over, and the part of Poland where I lived was taken over by the Russians. And prior to them entering the town, I'll never forget, the plane flew over the town and they dropped leaflets telling us that they are going to liberate us. And about a couple of months later, the liberation started with, they arrested my aunt, they sent her to Siberia, then they arrested her entire family and sent them to Siberia. Life wasn't easy under the Soviets, but what we expected later on, and we didn't know, was this was nothing compared to what the future will bring. We went to school, of course, and like every boy, we played sports in the summertime, playing football. We used to call it soccer, volleyball. In the winter, we used to look forward to go ice skating. And like I said, everything came to an end. When the Second War started, when Germany attacked Russia, it started June 22nd, 1941. And I remember like yesterday, they bombed the city, and as a matter of fact, the street where my friend Leon lived, they destroyed most of the street that time. And like a little boy, I was curious. I stood behind the building and watched the, watched the plane dropping bombs. And whatever we could, we had very good friends, and we gave them some of our belongings to save, not to be destroyed. Two weeks later, the German army came into our town. And things started getting worse by the day. The people that were our friends turned out to be our enemies. They started right away volunteering, they call it, because nobody was drafted into the police, and a lot of kids that my sisters went to the Polish public schools, and I attended Hebrew school. And all those friends that my sisters had, Polish kids, and a lot of them became collaborators and joined the police. As a matter of fact, until today, I remember the names and their faces still before me. And 2 weeks later again, actually more than 2 weeks, they told all the men to report from 16 to 60 to report in the marketplace. And my father was among them. And they picked out, in other words, the policemen, they picked out 220 men because the Germans actually didn't know who was what and who's a Jew and who's not a Jew. And they helped them, and they picked out 224 men, my father among them. And they took him about 1.5 miles from our house, and they shot every one of them. Of course, it was a big tragedy, and my mother, as a matter of fact, gave up after that, losing her husband, and she just couldn't take it. And as a matter of fact, the kids we used to watch my mother because she says her life is finished without my father. And excuse me. But that's where my story ends as a young boy. And I reported every single day for work, like my friend Leon did, and many others. And we didn't have any factories or anything, just manual work. They used to make us work at things that it wasn't even necessary. And each day, different orders. Then we made us wear first armbands, it said Judith, then we had stars, the Star of David we were wearing. And that went on until, I would say, about from August 1st to the end of September. And they ordered all the Jewish people that live in the surroundings area, in little towns, in villages, and to move in to this city, because the town where I lived, there were about 3,000 people. About 70% of them were Jewish, so roughly about 2,000 people. And they brought in another 1,000 from other little towns. And in my home, there were about 3 or 4 families living in the same house. And of course, it was terrible even to describe. When I start thinking about it, sometimes I don't believe it myself. I think, is it really true? I didn't. And in that, from lasted until 1942. And May the 8th, in 1942, they surrounded the town again, and they kept us in the homes for 4 days without water, without any food, of course, and they wouldn't allow anybody going to go out to the outhouses, and whoever dared to go out to the outhouse, they used to kill him, shoot him right away. And for 4 days they kept us like this. And the 5th day, May 12th, they woke up everybody, about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning it was, and they started screaming and yelling, "Alle Juden raus, all the Jews get out of their houses." And of course, like I said, I have to keep on emphasizing, because we never believed that our friends were before the war, and they'll turn against us. And they helped from day one. They helped the Germans, and they knew who lives in which house. And as everybody was starting to walk out of the homes, my mother, of course, I expected to go with my mother, my 3 sisters. I was the youngest one, and my grandmother. Maternal grandmother lived with us. She was 75 years old. And my mother said to me, "You are not going to go." I said, "Yes," and I started crying, hold her for her sleep. And she says, "No, you're going to hide in the attic." And I kept on crying, and she says, "No, you have to survive. And you have to tell what happened. And you have to take Nekome, if Nekome means revenge." And of course, I listened to my mother. I went up to the attic, and that was, like I said, about 5, 6 in the morning. By 12, and then I was curious to see what happens. I looked in the little window that I have in the attic, and they kept chasing everybody, and whoever couldn't walk, they killed them right away on the spot. And it was unbelievable. I can't even stand here and to tell you what took place, because it was really tragic. And by then I started hearing machine guns and rifle shots and all these things here. And by 12 o'clock, it quieted down. There were no more shootings. And that day they killed 2,500 men, women, and children. And among them was my mother, my grandmother, and my 2 sisters, because my older sister was killed later on. And I didn't know whether I should come out from the attic or not, because I didn't know really what was going on. But I heard screams and crying, in the house. And I said, I'll go. So I jumped out from the attic. And there were people, and they saw me, you know, they didn't even know where they are. They were like in a different world, and everybody was crying because everyone lost either a mother, a father, or sisters, you know. And the first thing I did, I walked into the bedroom where my mother used to sleep there, my sisters, you know, because, like I said, we had only one room because the rest of the rooms were other families there. And as I walked into the bedroom, I saw my sister sitting, and she, by then, by the way, I didn't mention, but my sister gave birth while we were under the occupation there. And she was crying and pulling her hair and screaming, and I walked in and she didn't even know that it's me standing in front of her. And I started shaking her like that. I said, "What happened? Tell me what happened." She says, "Everybody's dead. Everybody's dead," you know, like this here. And after a few days, but there's so much to talk about it, you know, but it's impossible to describe from what really went on. But after this big, terrible tragedy, after they killed 2,500 people, they put all the young boys and men to work, and I was assigned to work. We used to march every morning about 5 kilometers, and then we worked in the digging pit. I don't know if you know what it is. The pit, they dry it, and the sun, they use it instead of coals. And we were standing up till here in water. And that went on until December. December of the same year, they made an announcement, and it was really one of the coldest winters that time in 1942, that they'll take a number of people that are going to take him to a work camp to another city in Borisov, which is in Russia. And at that time, I escaped. And I went to the village, actually, because I was born in a village, and when I was 3, we moved to the city. And I came to that village, and it was, you see, where I lived, the village where I was born were all Belarusian, Russian people. The part where I lived in the town were Polish people. And like I said, the hatred, they hated more. They hated more the Jews than they should have hated the Germans for destroying their country. But they hated more the Jews. And by the time I got to the village, it was close to the morning, and I knocked on the door to one of our neighbors, my grandmother's neighbor, and she took me into the house and treated me very nice, like a young child, and I was like almost frozen from the snow that I kept. And I didn't know until then what a partisan even was. I never heard of partisan because, yes, we did have an underground organization in the ghetto, but I was too young to be private to know what it is. But I met the wrong partisans. They were not partisan, they were marauders or whatever you call them. And then there came an order from the real partisan organization to get all these guys and shoot them because they made a very bad reputation for all the partisans, the real partisans. And I was caught innocently with them. And I had to go back to the ghetto. I had no place to go. I came back to the ghetto. I was there 2 more weeks, and it was, I think, the first, second or the third day of January. And I came, and they made an announcement that the rest of the Jews are going to be taken to a work camp. But we knew already the stories. There were no work camps. They used to take him and someplace else and kill him. And I had no intentions of running away again because I had no way to run because the partisans, wouldn't accept me, the other ones. So, but anyway, I did ran out of the ghetto. And I escaped again the second time. My sister had a baby. That time couldn't go. And I had no intentions. And as a matter of fact, I remember when I ran out and my sister was standing waving her hand to me, holding the baby. And I came back to that village. And I joined the real partisans. Well, this is a story which would take too long, but they didn't, the partisans also, they didn't want to take in any, especially children or women or elderly men. And on top of it, they wanted to have rifles or guns or anything, because what are they going to do? And at times, some of them escaped that did have rifles. They took the rifles away from them and they killed them too. Even partisans, because the anti-Semitism among the partisans was terrible. And then we also had Polish underground, and they wouldn't take a Jew in the first place. And they also participated in catching the Jewish partisans and taking away their rifles and killing them. But somehow I joined the real partisans. They didn't want to take me in, and I started begging them, and they said, and I told them I'm a year older, and they take me in, and we drove about 30 miles or 25 miles deep in the forest, and I didn't have any basic training. They gave me right away a gun and about 35 rounds of ammunition. They showed me how to load the gun, and I became a partisan. It was very rough for me the first, I would say, 6 to 8 months, because I didn't know anything about fighting. I didn't know anything about what is, and on every step that I made, they used to make fun of me. I'm a Jew, I don't know how to fight. And so they used to put me on guard duty, and other things. And by the middle of the summer of 1943, the Germans surrounded the forest. And again, I didn't mention one thing that I forgot, and I'll make it real fast. The Lithuanians, when they killed my father, only number of Germans came in that time on trucks, but most of them were Lithuanians. And the same thing when they killed the 2,500 people in my town. There were not too many Germans with them. They were mostly Lithuanians, Ukrainians, that volunteers. And what better place of thing to the volunteers to kill the Jews for the way they felt about it. And in 1943, like I said, they surrounded the forest and they kept everybody, we went different ways in small groups, because the bigger the group is going to be more people, the harder it'll be to survive. So they picked me out and another 3 Jewish girls that were, and for the women it was much tougher than for me, for the men, and 2 other men. And we went to in different places, and went into the marshes, and we were there for 2 weeks without food. Just as a matter of fact, they gave us a few slices of bread, and after 2 weeks we came out. And prior to that, actually, an artillery shell fell. Well, the 4 of us were sitting there, or 5 of us were that time. And luckily, I walked away when that artillery shell fell, and they killed 2 of the 5 people that I was together with them. And after we got out of the woods, we came back again to the same area. And the partisans that I was with was called the Stalin's Brigade. They were known the most anti-Semitic brigade in the entire Belarusian front over there. But by then already, I became a scout, which was one of the most dangerous jobs. And I went to missions, to support group. Of course, I didn't know how to blow up the trains, but we went and we destroyed bridges and trains, and that went on until the end of 1943. In 1944, things turned a little bit better in our way, because the Germans were defeated in many places, and in certain areas they started to retreat. And I was in many battles with the Germans, but mostly we didn't fight. So when I say the Germans, you couldn't find the army. We weren't strong enough to fight the real German army, but we tried to destroy a lot of the precincts where the volunteers or the collaborators were there. We tried to kill small groups of Germans or Polish policemen. And in 1944, like I said, things started getting, I felt it was getting better for me because we used to catch a lot of German prisoners of war already when the German army started retreating. And besides being in the scouts, I was an interpreter, trying to interpret for every time we kill or negotiate surrender by the Germans. On many occasions, whether it was a platoon or it was a company, and sometimes I was wondering, because after the interrogation, and I was interrogating, even then they said, and of course I had to interpret it to my commanding officer. And on many occasions they said, if not for these goddamn Jews, he said, there would be no war. And I'm standing there and I'm listening and telling it to me, you know, like that. Yeah. Of course I interpreted the way I felt like interpreting it, because they didn't understand. And in September 1944, the Germans were chased out of there, and whoever was, first they took the entire, by then already they had about between 200 and 300,000 partisans in all of Eastern Europe, and they took us to Minsk, to the capital of Belarus, and whoever was 18 years or over, they took him right away into the army straight, but since I was not 18 years old. But one thing I forgot to mention before, we had plenty of heroes, the Jewish partisan. You know, they were fighting whatever they could, you know, with all these things that were against them. And what you've seen before the reunion, there was Judith Ginsburg, the Ginsburg family. They were the heroes, really. When I say heroes, I meant hero, because one of the brothers was the Ginsburg brothers. He was recommended for the hero of the Soviet Union, luckily, the Congressional Medal of Honor here. And when they came back also, and then he was killed, one of the brothers was killed in 1944. Not by the Germans, but also he went to a village and he was killed by one of the Polish underground. And I came back to my hometown. My house was there then, and it's still now. And I walked into the house. I walked in from one end to the other, and I stayed in town for about a year. Never walked back into my house again. But I went to live with a distant relative of mine, and there was no room for everyone, and I slept on the floor and gone because I couldn't walk into my house again. But one thing we did, you know, we worked, my friends and I, we worked for the police, and our main purpose was to try to catch as many collaborators as possibly we can. And we did catch them, a lot of them. Some of them escaped and they went with the German army, retreated into Warsaw, further up. And after 1 year being, and I was taken into the Russian army, which was already just a week after the end of the war in 1945. I was in the army, and I had it pretty good in the army, in the Russian army. I'm not complaining, even though there was so much anti-Semitism there. Wherever you turn around, nobody liked us. It's like unbelievable. Wherever I turn around, it was just anti-Semitism. So in the Russian army, the same thing. But I didn't feel that because I had a very good job in the army. I became the chief clerk of the battalion, and then I worked for the commanding officer there. And you'll see in the back there's a picture of one of the lieutenants that I also worked with. And in January of 1946, I was sent, and I was stationed, by the way, in the Polish border, Brest-Litovsk, you know, the border, and I was sent on a mission. And the entire month of January took me to go from the Polish border until Mongolia, to the Far East. And I went to Moscow, from Moscow to Siberia, then for the outer Mongolia there. And then on the way back, I went to Kazakhstan. And by the end of the month, I came back to my outfit, and I found out that every soldier who was born in Poland has the right to be transferred to the Polish army. Well, I didn't want to be transferred to the Polish army, but I knew then that the only way for me to get out of Russia is to be transferred to the Polish army and to see what happened. We'll be closer to the western frontiers with Germany and the other countries. So I asked, and actually the lieutenant, his name was Vladimir Rubin, and he told me about it because I wasn't supposed to know about the order that came in to be transferred to the Polish army. And I had a transfer to the Polish army. First I went back to my hometown to see the graves again where my parents were killed and everybody else. And as I crossed the border from Russia to Poland, the train stopped, and I met a few people, Jewish from Palestine, representing the underground, the Jewish underground, and they were trying to get as many Jewish soldiers as possible to take them to Palestine. And they brought me to West Germany, to Munich, and then before that they brought us to a place there. They tried to train us, but the Jews couldn't get into Palestine. They were sent to Cyprus. And I spent another year in Germany, and then I came to the United States. But instead of going to Palestine, because I got in touch already by then, I was in touch with my uncle in Brooklyn and with my aunt in Palestine, and I came to the United States. Came to a land that was free, and I loved it just by being here and just getting away from all the problems. And the Korean War broke out. So I was in the Russian army, the partisans, and when I came here, the war broke out, and I was taken into the American army. And I spent 2 years in the American army, but I wasn't sent to Korea because I passed the test in English, in Polish, German, and Russian, and I was sent to Europe, back to Europe. But that was actually very good for me, and I had a very nice time in the American army. When I got out of the army, I went to the garment industry, started as a cutter, and from the cutting table, I graduated to be one of the executives in a very big company. And I accomplished a lot in America, very much. But my biggest accomplishment, when I look back on my life, is sitting over here. My children, 4 generations, my children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren. And that's my biggest accomplishment. Thank you very much.
It's one thing to read these stories in a book, but it's quite another to hear them in person. And we are so grateful that Alan decided to share his remarkable story with you this evening. We thank you so much for coming. Please mark your new 2014 calendars for Wednesday, February 5th, when you will view a fascinating PBS documentary which tells how members of the Frieder family saved 1,300 Jews in the Philippines. 2 Frieder brothers will be special guests that evening. And now, a final song from Sean Berry's wonderful young singers of the Palm Beaches, and then please join us afterwards for an afterglow, an opportunity to ask Alan questions and to view some of the materials that he brought to share with you. Thank you again.